Are we good?
Good. All right, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we're good.
And we'll call the meeting back into public session. We were in executive session to receive legal update regarding the CAA mediation and to discuss a consultant contract with Parker Poe Consulting. No action was taken. Okay. Item 9, action items, the August financial report. Michael?
Good morning, Chairman Payne, members of the board, Superintendent Neely. I present the August 31st financial report. After 2 months of operations, we should be about at 83% budget remaining. We're currently at 86%, so we're a little ahead of the game there. I've included a breakout of the EIA funding that we received. In addition, I've added some additional reports on the amount of funding we receive monthly in our state revenue, in our general fund revenues, and as well as our grants balances and drawdowns. So the first report, excuse me, lists all of our district's revenue, including the payments to schools. $25,458,577 in revenues, and expenditures of $25,416,801 for a net difference of $41,776. That includes the payments to the schools as well. The next report is district office only. Actual year to date through August, $582,834 in revenue, and then total expenditures of $534,859 for a net difference of $47,975. You compare that to our beginning fund balance, that would create a fund balance of $1.9 million at the end of the year. Next report lists our divisions. Total leadership, 197,618. Sponsor performance, 79,586. Support and implementation, 107,328. And then finally, financial services and operations and HR, 158,327 for a total of 534,859, or 86% remaining from our budget. The next report is our EIA funding glossary. This is the total amount of allocations we received for the entire year, if you broke it out by monthly. So total is 176, 548, 664, 63. And those are the various funding streams we've received on those. The next report is our EIA funding from the State Department. Again, you see the 176, 548, 664, 63. The new report, you can see right here, it lists our total allocation, the graphical report. We will update this throughout the year as we go through our funding periods. Of course, we're still our funding based on 135 right now. The State Department is not updated on a 5-day count. That will happen this month in September. And then we update again at 45-day and 135. So we'll track this as we go to see our funding increases throughout the times of the year. This next report, again, I'll introduce it quarterly. It shows our funding this year compared to last year. It's important because this will pick up on all the funding changes related to the new funding formula. You'll see last year we were at July of 21, we were at 12.7 million. July of 22, we're at 14.9. And again, that does not include our funding for this year. That is still based on prior 135. But we'll update that quarterly throughout the year. And then finally at the end, this is our federal fund snapshot. In addition to our state funding of $180 million, we received well over $68 million in federal funds that we manage as well. If you look at July 22, we have $68,352,000 in federal revenue received, and we've drawn down over 50% of that money already. So that will increase throughout the year as we get additional grants through the year. Point out one thing, last year we were only at 35% in drawdowns. So our schools are doing better with drawing down grants and working our financial office and our federal programs office area. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report for the month of August.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have a question just on the last thing you said, the drawdowns, the schools are doing a more proactive job in that. Can you tell us how that came about?
It's just being more stewards of taxpayer money, making sure this is a reimbursement grant. So if you're awarded $100,000, you should be drawing that money every month. That you spend $1,000 on teacher salary or whatever, you should be getting your money back reimbursements. And in the past, they didn't do a good job with that. So it's just us pushing it's good cash flow mentality.
Just follow up to that. Is that also an indication of the workability that is now in place, the dynamics of good working relationships, so they have a more open phone to you and you to them?
I think it's a direct result of the marriage between federal
staff, all of yes.
Yeah,
yes,
the marriage between federal programs and finance, and then getting those schools to push to get the claims in. It's helping. It's working a lot.
Yeah, it's a relational thing too. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
That's really great. And I know the schools are so happy with their performance in this.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I know it's a small amount, but the education license plate, is that 177.52 for the whole year?
That's for the whole year. That changes throughout the year as more people get those educational license plates, and then the money is spread out to the districts based on how many folks. So get your educational license plates because the money comes back in to the schools and to the
How do
district.
you determine how much is in each school?
The State Department determines the allocation amount based on the size of the district.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we need a motion to accept the August financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. None opposed. Thank you, Michael. All right, Mr. Norton, Parker Poe Consulting Contract.
Yes, the Parker Poe Consulting Contract you have in your packets. It's consistent with other contracts of similar nature and type, and we've discussed it a little bit in executive session. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about it in public session.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Well, I don't have a question, but surely tell us a little more about it. Just say some things about it.
I mean, it's
the dynamic of it.
Sure, it's this is a contract that staff feels is important to be able to help build government relations over in the State House, as well as provide advice and counsel regarding a lot of the political matters that come up during the course of the year. As you all know, the legislature considers charter legislation almost every year, or has for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's been the district's experience that trying to have staff do it, which has been tried in the past, just takes staff away from schools too much. It requires a steady hand over at the legislature in both the House and the Senate to stay on top of all the things that occur over there that could or might relate to charter schools, including things that are put into Title 59, which is the general education title, that have a impact on charter schools as well. Does that answer the question a little better?
Yes. And will, I have met Mr. Pulaski, but will we have an opportunity to meet him as a board?
Oh, yes.
I'm sure so. He's not shy.
No.
No.
He'll look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the contract with Parker Poe Consulting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. It's not opposed. Thank you. All right, Mr. Butcher, informational item, policy subcommittee report.
Mr. Chairman, because of the Labor Day holiday, we did not meet this month, but the staff is already rescheduling that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Norton, board orientation training.
Thank you. So this is part one of many parts of orientation. Stan Davis will be doing most of the board training going forward. He's online. Hopefully, he's able to access, what's online for you, and we'll be doing this as we go forward. What I've got from you is a very large notebook that we will not go through today.
Thank you.
It is all documents you've seen before. It's a resource. It's not something that we're going to cover. If you look at the table of contents, you'll see what it includes. I sort of, with one exception, put in I sort of drew the line at about 2020 for how far back we'd go for relevant documents. Hopefully, this is a useful resource for you that you can keep, and we'll have it because it has most of the legal authority and some reports and whatnot. What I wanted to make sure you understood in consultation with Stan, who will be doing, starting next time, your board training, which will follow up on this orientation, is to make sure that you are aware of how the legal structure, the organizational structure of the board works. And so I've got basically 3 PowerPoint slides that we'll go through quickly. That will be a reminder for most of you. For some of you that haven't thought about it in a while, I think it's useful to think about. And you'll see the slide that's up there on the form. You'll see that the district operates simultaneously within 3 organizational structures. And the first one is within the state. And the state has sort of a step-down process. It's sort of a hierarchy of authority, starting with the Charter Act, then the charter regulations, then the charter itself, and the charter contract. And the Charter Act, what's important to you all is that it's what actually creates the district. It's very different than a traditional district, which is created by local legislation effectively, and local districts exist because they have a taxing authority. You don't have a taxing authority. You have to be created separately, and you have been created separately in the Charter Act. Your powers and duties are also set forth there. There are things about this board that are different than a traditional school board. Number one, you don't have football teams, so you can all be grateful for that, that you don't have to deal with all of those kinds of things. Number two, you have some direct responsibilities that traditional boards also have if they have charter schools, but don't necessarily, and that is approving charters, recommending charters for renewal or not renewal, and then in certain circumstances having to recommend for revocation. Those are your powers and duties, but the important thing for you to remember is that other than those specific duties that are set out, you really have the same powers and duties as any school board. You can't tax, okay, that's the one thing you can't do, but you do have essentially the other powers and duties that a regular school board would have. The Charter Act also has information, or also has an organizational structure for our charter schools that I think are helpful for you to remember as you go through your training, and that is charter schools are public schools. We oftentimes, that oftentimes gets confused in the media and other places, but they're public schools, just like any other public school. What makes them different than a traditional public school is that these applicants in schools on their own have legal rights separate and distinct from the district. They are set up as 501c3 organizations, they're nonprofits, and they have their own legal rights. The other thing that makes them different is that they are exempt from certain laws and regulations. That list seems to get smaller and smaller, based on how we've gone over the last 10 years of what charters are exempt from, but generally speaking, the law says that charters are exempt from all regulations except for health, safety, anti-discrimination, and those sorts of things. The other place that the Charter Act makes it fairly clear is that charter schools also are subject to the same fiscal accountability requirements. It doesn't say that in the same section, but it's there. The Charter Act gives the department the authority and responsibility to promulgate charter regulations. In the Charter Act, it specifically says that they will include regulations for the application process, and that exists. That's been done. It's included in your notebook. The department has not really added regulation for other aspects of charter operations. Has authority to, but it has not done so. It varies a little bit out of that, even though the section of the regulations is titled application process. They veer a little bit out of it occasionally, but for the most part, that's what it's about. And I think one of the reasons I bring this up to you is that I think we'll hear a little bit more about the need potentially for additional charter regulation with the advent of a third authorizer, with there being multiple applications to different people. Some of these processes that were put into place in the charter regulations did not contemplate the multiple authorizers. But that is your next level of authority. Then we get down to what you're familiar with the most, which is the charter and the charter contract. I know most people don't, it's hard to kind of think about them as separate documents. They are separate documents. The charter is the application, that's approved. That becomes the charter. The charter contract is on a template that the State Department provides and can be supplemented by the district. The biggest difference is that the charter contract has more of the operational details. That's the biggest difference. The charter itself, it sort of sets high-level expectations, describes the programs generally, but even then, there are some pretty specific requirements in the charter application that schools have to fill out, including enrollment expectations and things like that. Where that comes to you guys most often is in the form of requests to amend. People want to amend their charters for things as simple as we'd like to be able to admit more students, to things as complicated as we want to add a high school to our elementary school, whatever. So that's where that all comes into play. In addition to the state organizational structure, there's a federal organizational structure. In the Charter Act, it provides that the district is the LEA. And if you look across the country, it's a mixed bag of whether authorizing bodies like the charter district serve as the LEA, or whether the schools do, or whether some other entities do. More and more, it's becoming common that the authorizing body is the LEA. The State Department of Education is the SEA, the state educational agency. And one thing that we all learned going through the audit process and some of these other things is that the schools are sub-grantees, maybe. They're something. We'll let Michael figure that out. But as far as the law goes, they're really treated as a sub-grantee of the district. Financially, sometimes they're treated a little differently, depending on the grant and the federal source. But generally, as a matter of law, they're treated like a sub-grantee in most of our programs. And what that means is that they essentially are responsible for putting into effect the programs. The district is responsible for overseeing that process and making sure that the schools as sub-grantees follow the requirements. It also, in the Charter Act, also makes all charter schools subject to federal statutes and regulations that apply to public schools, like special education and anti-discrimination laws. And the special education process works just like we described. The schools are effectively treated as sub-grantees. The district receives the funds, passes them on to the schools. The district oversees special education compliance. What's important there, though, is that when a parent makes a complaint, for example, against a school for special education noncompliance, the actual legal complaint is against the district. Okay, so the district actually carries that responsibility. In the charter, the school agrees to comply with federal law, and then the charter contract provides the operational details of how they will do that. Okay. Finally, we have an internal organization structure. The internal organization structure is really just how the operations of the district go. It starts with the executive branch, which is where the district fits. We fall under the governor's authority. We're treated like a board or commission and a school district. If you're looking at those things and you're thinking they seem inconsistent, you would be right. There are inconsistencies in that. There are some conflicts in the law, and it creates some head scratchers sometimes. But overall, we're able to navigate that without too much difficulty anymore. There was a time when it was harder, but now it's a little bit easier. After the executive branch, we do also fall under the constitutional office of the state superintendent, who really exercises authority under two different ways. One's under the funding manual. That's the primary relationship between the State Department and the district. The funds that are sent from the legislature to the State Department to us have to be spent in accordance with the State Department of Education's funding manual. When you get down to the school level as a sub-grantee, there's a little more flexibility there, but they generally have to follow the funding manual as a matter of contract with us. There are occasions when we are able to give them a little more flexibility than what the strict funding manual requires, just because the schools are so small and there are just some things that don't apply. But for the most part, we have to follow that, and so do the schools. There's also program oversight from the State Department of Education. That's not just the authorizing function, but anything. I mean, the most common way, if you talk to school leaders, that they see this is probably through the Read to Succeed program, where state funds reading coaches and schools have to comply in certain ways. It's a really common example. After the State Department of Education, you get to your board policies, and that's what we're going to be working on so hard this year. We've already started that process, and I know Jonathan will update you a little bit about where we are on that when we get to that item in the agenda. But generally speaking, in terms of the policy subcommittee, where we are is we didn't meet for September, and I'll just go ahead and do it if you're okay, Jonathan. You can then repeat it. But we're still working on that. We didn't meet in September because of the Labor Day holiday, because it interfered with our time, but we'll be back in October and really expect to move fast through these governance processes and get it to you so that you can think about some of the changes you want to make. It talks about our internal operations. And then the actual document that governs the relationship between the district and the schools on an operational level is the charter contract. So at any one time, the district is operating on 3 different organizational structures, which is not entirely different than a traditional district, but the source of that authority is a little bit different. And the ability of the district to handle things like funding, for example, is limited to our ability to go to the state as opposed to impose taxes. And our ability to look beyond the district's operations to the school's operations is limited by the school's autonomy. And that is something that is the sort of foundation of the Charter Act, is that the schools at the school level make these kind of operational day-to-day decisions. The district oversees that process to ensure compliance and provide support where it can and where it's necessary as an LEA, a local education agency. And that structure really lays over the top of all the things that the district does. When you get to your training next week or next month with Stan, what we ask, and Stan's got these slides and he's got it and you'll hear him, you're going to have to think about, how your policies and procedures that you want to put into place, how your operations can meet the sometimes conflicting responsibilities of these 3 areas. For example, the most common tension is you have an obligation to hold schools accountable for meeting its charter goals. As an LEA, you have an obligation to provide support for certain programs and functions. It can be hard to be the teacher and the grader, as we all know. And that's sort of what the district has to do, is you're asked to be the teacher and the grader. You're asked to teach, you're asked to support, and you're asked to hold accountable. So it's really a mirror of the classroom process. I'll be glad to take any questions if you have any, but I'm looking forward to hearing Stan talk, and I'm glad to get you guys any more materials that you want. I know that we didn't do a walkthrough of the statute. I'm sure that you would have enjoyed it had we done it, but I don't think that's necessary given how much we
We all know
do.
that. We all know the stuff.
You got it all taken care of.
All
But I
30
do think the organizational structure is important, that you got to remember every time that you take on a support obligation, how does that impact our obligation to hold accountable? Every time you decide to take on an accountability obligation, how does that impact your ability to support? It's difficult to do all those things at one time. These 3 organizational structures is why you have that tension. And if you can kind of think through your changes with those top line organizational structures in mind, I think it helps you balance that. And I think Stan will be able to help you more when he gets here. You get into the details of those things.
Any questions for Eric? All right, thank you.
Yep.
Superintendent Neely.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call on our good friend Kathleen Bounds and her family to come up front, and I'd like to ask you to come down and join them. Y'all can just face the audience. So we got cameras coming from different directions, so I know we've got people watching online, and we want to make sure that that everybody can see you. Today is a very special day in the life of the South Carolina Public Charter School District. We are gathered to honor and pay tribute to a friend, colleague, student advocate, and honorable public servant, Kathleen Bounds. We have a saying at Clemson that a Clemson man needs no introduction. Well, it's also true that a UVA lady speaks for herself. But for those watching this board meeting and are not familiar with our friend, please allow me to introduce her to you. For those who know her well, this is a reminder of the dedication and service Kathleen has committed her life. Kathleen Bounds is the former chairwoman of the Berkeley County School Board in South Carolina. She graduated with honors from the University of Virginia, and she is the proud mom of 2 children, Katie and Tim, both graduates of Berkeley High and USC, and the proud grandmother of Ansel, Anna Caroline Todd, and Hannah Bounds. and two of them are here today, and I understand I've got to write them an excuse for school. Kathleen has been recognized across the state of South Carolina as a champion of education. She was recognized by the South Carolina School Boards Association with the Champion for Children Award in 2000. She has also been recognized for outstanding volunteering efforts by Berkeley Intermediate School, Berkeley High School, and the Berkeley County School District. She recently retired from the South Carolina Public Charter School District Board of Trustees, where she was a founding board member and was our board secretary for many years. She has served as a member and officer in the following parent-teacher organizations. She's done it all, folks. Berkeley Elementary, Berkeley Intermediate, and Berkeley Middle School. She served on the Berkeley County School District Strategic Planning Committee, has been a booster of the Berkeley High School Athletic Department for nearly 25 years, and was a charter member of the Berkeley High School Academic Booster Club, subsequently serving as president. She is also a charter member of the Berkeley County Education Foundation, and she also served as an officer in the South Carolina School Boards Association. Prior to her service on the school board, she served on the Moncks Corner Planning and Zoning Board. That's a lot of fun. She previously served as a volunteer guardian ad litem for 20 years and has served on the Foster Care Review Board since 1999, and she currently is their chair. She also is a past member of the prestigious Coastal Community Foundation of Charleston. From 1999 to 2001, she served as chairman of the Berkeley County First Steps Partnership Board. She is active at her home parish, Trinity Episcopal Church in Panopolis, South Carolina, and has served as the parish's senior warden. And just a few months ago, she was awarded the Order of the Silver Crescent by Governor Henry McMaster in recognition of all of her outstanding public service. Now, that's just a snapshot of the life of Kathleen Bounds and her service to our community, state, and nation. There's so much more that could be said about our friend that speaks to her character, concern for others, compassion for those who need a voice, and her love of family. God knows those details, and I'm sure He's pleased. Last year, our board, staff, and school partners collaborated to design a new mission, vision, and values that would represent our brand and carry this district into the future of education in South Carolina. Kathleen was an integral voice in helping shape our creed, a set of principles that value all students' unique talents and abilities, guided by a belief in focus, integrity, equity, excellence, and relationships. Kathleen represents the best of those values. As a founding member of this board, Kathleen was focused. She understood and believed in our mission of opening and holding accountable high-quality charter schools that provided access to academic opportunities for every student in South Carolina to reach their fullest potential. She asked the tough questions and did her homework. She expected nothing but our best for children. She was a public servant of the highest integrity and character. She lived by the oath and committed herself to being honest, transparent, accountable, and noble in her work on the board. She could be trusted. Kathleen believes in equity, that every child starts from a different starting line, and that we as educators have a responsibility to close the achievement gap for every student, regardless of who they are and where they come from. Every child matters. Kathleen expects excellence in herself and others. She was willing to do the hard work to be the best that she could be, and in return, we all wanted to exemplify excellence in ourselves. She was a model public servant for adults and our children. Finally, Kathleen values relationships. Her selfless interest in others and her family is, quite frankly, her most endearing quality. I knew the first time I met her during my transfer request presentation to this board more than 5 years ago that she cared deeply about children. I saw her compassion for children in her eyes during the play-in of our promotional video of the children at the Meyer Center, like my son Marsh. She was genuine and she reflected our Lord. Matthew 18:10 tells us that Jesus said, "Beware that you don't look down upon a single one of these little children, For I tell you that in heaven their angels have constant access to my Father. Friends, the children of our state also have an angel on earth, and her name is Kathleen. As a dedicated servant of children and the values we share, she too has access to the Father. Can I get an amen? Therefore, today, September 15th, 2022, the board, staff, schools, parents, and children of the South Carolina Public Charter School District officially dedicate and name this auditorium the Bounds Auditorium in honor of a true public servant, dedicated board member, and lifelong friend of education in South Carolina, Kathleen Bounds. Please join me in celebrating our friend, Kathleen.
Thanks. On? Yeah. I couldn't have imagined a more beautiful and humbling introduction. It's been my joy to serve with many of you in this room. It's great to see familiar faces, but just as great to see new ones, because that means new blood, new ideas. We're going to keep on going. Just, Michael, this is for you. Just to touch on the numbers. I've been here a number of years. I've served with 5 different superintendents. I quit counting at 45, but I have served with a number of board members over time. This group is really good, by the way. And I need to thank all the staff. And I didn't get anywhere near the total number of staff that it's been my pleasure to work with over time. Those are folks who do the work. They do the work we ask them to do, and then they do more. I was glad to hear, kind of glad to hear, your Clemson reference, but certainly thank you from One Wahoo. This has been the joy of my life, along with my family, some of whom are here. My sister Ann, my sister Jean, my daughter Katie, my grandson Ansel, and my granddaughter Anna Caroline. I did share this agenda with other members of my family who could not be here, so hello, Tim and Allie and Hannah in Denver. Hello to my sister Helen in California. Hello to my brother Rod, who probably will see this not live, in Virginia, and his wife Karen. Again, this work is so challenging, but that makes it so rewarding. And having received the Order of the Silver Crescent from the governor earlier this year, it's truly an embarrassment of riches. Thank you, Chris. Where did John go? Oh, John's down here. Thank you, John, and members of the board. Thanks to all my friends. Oh, and by the way, I've had an invitation to come back in February to review applications. So, as Roy and Dale would say, happy trails till we meet again. Thank you so very, very much. I have one more introduction to make. One of my very close friends and former colleagues is here to celebrate with me. Lindsay, will you stand up and be recognized? Lindsay Staley, ladies and gentlemen. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
So after the board meeting, we'll go out into the hallway and we'll have the unveiling. And we'll invite everyone to join us for that. And we'll make sure and get photos for your family.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Superintendent, your superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to call on our Deputy Superintendent of Sponsor Performance, John R. Payne.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this morning I'm going to share with you some updates from my division, starting first with some accountability results. Thank you. So last week, the South Carolina Department of Education publicly released assessment data for SC Ready for English Language Arts and Math assessments that were administered to all 3rd through 8th grade students last year. As you know, these are federally and state required assessments in the 2 core content areas which have 4 performance levels: does not meet, approaches, meets expectations, and exceeds expectations. For accountability purposes, students who score meets or exceeds count positively towards each school's academic part of the state report card. Students who score meets or exceeds show that they are on a pathway for successful college entrance when they graduate. We have thus far conducted 2 sets of analysis at the district level. First, we compared our district results from this past spring, to the state's results. Second, we compared our district performance this past spring to the performance that we had in 2021. I'm happy to report, as you will see, that the district is generally improving year over year, and our results demonstrate that our district has higher performance than the state performance rate. These data are the results of all students who took the assessment, which may look differently when the department publishes the annual state report card, because they apply certain rules for which students may be removed from the calculation. For example, a student has to be enrolled on the 45th day and stay enrolled in that school until the first day of testing for them to count for that particular elementary or middle school. This chart and graph that you're looking at now compares the district results to the state's results in English language arts by grade. As you'll notice, the percentage of students that score meets or exceeds is higher than the state's in each grade. However, it is important to note, though, that we still have a long way to go to ensure that our students and all students in South Carolina are college ready by the time they graduate. This chart is basically the same thing, but unlike ELA, these are the data for mathematics. And so we compared our performance, the percentage of students who scored meets or exceeds for us, compared that to the state. As you'll note on this slide, the overall performance in math is lower than ELA, and we also did not perform quite as well as the state in grades 4 and 5. Lower performance in mathematics is not unique to our district or even our state. Generally speaking, students tend to do better in ELA than in math. And we recognize, though, again, that we have a long way to go before we address the impacts caused by COVID-19 and push beyond the pre-pandemic performance. We next then analyzed our results this past spring to the spring of 2021 to see, compared to 2021, are we improving or not in spring of 2022? Again, with ELA, it was a clean sweep, where with the district outperforming in every grade the performance back in 2021. Again, I will repeat, we still have a long way to go to ensure students are scoring meets or exceeds both with the district as well as with the state. In terms of math, it was a little more mixed when we compared our results this past spring to the spring of 2021. There were 3 grades for which the percentage of our student scoring meets or exceeds was lower than the state. You'll see those as 4th, 6th, and 8th grade. So while we're pleased with our improved results, we know that there's more to be done. To that end, we have completed our analysis of the school level data, noting overall low percentages of student scoring meets or exceeds, as well as looking for changes from 21 to 22 where student scores may have gone down significantly or gone up significantly. Those data have been shared with our LEA colleagues, our LEA side of the house, to reach out to those schools to offer technical assistance, support, professional development, and the like. We've also begun an analysis of subgroup performance, and we'll have that information to share soon. One of the most significant findings we've noted in our review of these data, and I believe Dr. Strickland and Dr. Probe will particularly appreciate this, is that the percentage of our students whose score does not meet is going down. And does not meet is that performance level where really and genuinely students just have not mastered the expectations for that specific grade level. Which is exactly what we want. We want fewer students scoring in that lowest level because it means they're pushing up to those higher performance levels. On Monday, we received high school level data from the State Department of Education for end of course exams and career readiness assessment. These data are embargoed until Monday, September 19th, although we have already begun analyzing those data, and we'll share that information with you too in our October meeting. We're excited to analyze these state data in real time, even while it's embargoed, so that we can provide up-to-date information to our superintendent, our school leaders, as well as you. A few other notable highlights from my division include the following. I mentioned last month our work towards building and deploying a monthly data dashboard. We are finalizing both the template as well as the monthly reporting elements and hope to deploy that soon. The dashboard will include monthly information related to academics, finance, programs, governance, and communications. We're also continuing our work towards our performance framework. As I shared last time in July, we hosted a performance framework core team made up of representative leaders from our schools and to work in tandem with us to develop this as partners. Our second meeting is also slated for this upcoming Monday, September the 19th. After the July meeting, we intentionally waited some times because before we set the second meeting because we wanted to make sure that we were not pulling our school leaders out as they were trying to get open and restart the school year. We're also making headway in improvements to our website. We now have an interactive calendar that we encourage you to look at. We're still working on it, but we're proud of the work that we've done so far with additional features, web pages, and curated resources coming soon. Finally, I want to mention that the State Department of Education is slated to publicly release report cards on October 15th. As you probably recall, for the last several years, ratings for the indicators and overall ratings for schools have been suspended with waivers from the U.S. Department of Education. However, that is slated to resume this year with the report cards that will be released in October. As a matter of fact, yesterday the department released embargoed access to school superintendents, leaders, and school leaders to display some of those data so they can begin looking for errors and communicating back to get that finalized, but that is on schedule for a public release coming October, and we will update you, of course, as soon as that information becomes more available. In terms of a few updates from our authorization and development work, on August 30th, we hosted our Charter Academy for Year Zero schools. That is our schools that have just begun their planning year. We received great feedback from this event, which we held earlier than in prior years. Our next meeting with these schools is slated for October the 18th, with a final meeting scheduled for January. And at these meetings, we're basically providing in-depth information that is scaffolded to provide them the information they need in order to complete those pre-opening conditions. And so the feedback we've received is really quite positive, and I appreciate our staff's hard work for going into that. We've also done some work with our web pages with authorization and development, which is a component of our strategic plan. So as you see in this slide, our Open a School, we have a new Open a School web page that contains the charter application flow chart, the access to the letter of intent, some other resources, and added reference materials and newly created accessible resources for potential applicants. The next slide, this is a snapshot of the flow chart that we are providing to the public who may be interested in opening a charter school. We have had some conversations with several entities. As you know, letter of intents will be due November the 1st, and the applications will be due February the 1st. So we are already geared up with timeline, processes, and procedures to ensure that a smooth flow with that, and are tremendously excited to have Ms. Bound's expertise helping us with that work. The next slide really just gives, again, more resources that we've provided as well. This is from our charter application website. So this is just a snippet of what folks can find. And then the last thing here from that is just, again, some of the resources we're curating. This specific one is just illustration of community awareness, engagement, and support, resources that we've put together for interested individuals. We have also designed a new charter amendment webpage, which includes a charter amendment process flow chart, an embedded form stack enabling our school staff as well as our staff the ability to determine whether a plan change requires an amendment. It allows schools to directly submit their information, documentation, which is then reviewed by our department. So we've streamlined this as well. We've embedded it to be, again, just more streamlined, working smarter, not harder. The next slide shows you sort of a flow chart that we have also provided relative to amendments that we hope clearly describes this process and timeline. As you'll note, we have included in this flow chart a note to ask our schools to be present at our board meetings if they have an amendment for two reasons. One, it enables you to ask the questions that their school members are best poised to answer. And happily, too, it will give you opportunities to meet, talk with, and see our great school leaders. The next slide is just a snippet of the online form so they can fill this out. They can attach documents that substantiates their request for an amendment, and that goes directly to our staff who can review it fairly quickly. As a final word, we are, of course, again, gearing up for the State Department and the February 1st deadline. We are queuing up our reviewers and plan to do some training with our internal and external reviewers either December or January to really ensure that they're all singing from the same sheet of music, and that when we review our applications, we can, to the best degree possible, ensure that those align with our mission, vision, and our hope of putting children first in all that we do. And at that point, I believe I will be happy to entertain any questions board members you may have.
Mr. Chair, so I wanted to say, you said all students were included in the ELA and math results that you just showed us, so that's including schools that are in a corrective action plan, that's including schools that are alternative ed, all that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. So that would have been any student who would have taken the assessment last school year for SC Ready specifically.
Just to follow up on that, is there any way that would ever make sense for us to see the separation out of that too, so that I don't know, if there are some schools that would be in a different type of category, or do you think this is reflective of the whole? Is there any way, would it make any sense for us to see things that are maybe a little more, itemized out?
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things that we have done already is we have looked at the overall rates for by school, by grade, and really noted where, if there was a plus or minus 10% change from 21 to 22. So if it's a plus 10%, we want to engage in those discussions to say, what'd you do? You did something because you have now gone over 10% in increasing the number of students. Conversely, if we see a drop of 10% or more, in other words, they have decreased, we want to have a conversation to see what we can do to support those schools or have just understand the situation a little better. And again, that's done by grade, by school.
So you're
And we've-
looking more, you're looking at this, obviously, but you're also breaking down that pie.
Yes, ma'am. And then we're currently underway. Dr. Charlesworth, who is our statistics manager, is already analyzing the data by subgroup, as well as taking the end of course, which are embargoed. We've kind of got some overall just for internal purposes, but we've got to jump on that too to look at that not only overall, but also by school, by subject, and by subgroup.
I think the average overall is very helpful. So it's also just be curious to see alternative schools compared to each other and schools that are not in a corrective action plan taken out of the average to see, because that making sure that you're comparing apples to apples, I guess, or comparing schools that have not been recognized as needing help. So that's just another way to look at it. I'm not even really suggesting that it be done. I think that was the angle of the question, though, I think,
Perfect.
is
Okay.
that there are clearly charter schools that are operating under, I think, some different performance metrics maybe than some of the traditional schools alongside.
Yes, sir. And thank you for that.
Then I want to ask this question, it might be a little out of the scope, but does it look like, it appears, it is obvious, fourth grade is so important. Fourth grade is so important, especially in math. And with math being a cumulative pursuit academically, you got to, whatever we're winning in the third grade, we might be losing in the fourth grade, which impairs people, whatever type of school you're in, for those ongoing years. So what is the educational perspective on the importance of the fourth grade, especially in the issue of math? Is that kind of singular out in people's minds that this is the situation?
So a couple of ways to think about that. One, in general, we look at, in my experience, when we have, of course, SC Ready, and prior to that we had SC Pass, and then I think it was PAC before that, that goes back, I think, to the late 90s. Typically, students' performance is always, generally speaking, there's always a little dip in fourth grade, and it kind of goes back up. Obviously, with this, there is, the pandemic that's been involved, and that kind of thing that impacts this. The fourth graders this year were, of course, or this past school year, were third graders in whatever that 2020, 2021, where there was some, not everybody had to take the test. There was a lot of, information. There was some disagreement between the State Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education. Superintendent Spearman spoke publicly about that. So some of that I think is kind of contextual. And really that's why we're not only drilling down, but working with our LEA side of the house to really look at those and see what kind of supports, what are they doing? Are they implementing, different interventions or programs with fidelity, and how can we support them in that? Part of this work, we've also chronicled every school's goals, and we've begun a review of that and want to be having conversations with our school leaders around their goals just to ensure that they're, well-written goals. And we'll be working with some folks to assist us in that, to look at that linkage between what are they saying in their goals and then what are the results that we're seeing when the state and federal report card system comes out.
I'm sure the complexity of math as it progresses requires that strong foundation.
It does, yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to start admiring fourth graders when I meet them more. They're an important place in their life. Okay,
ma'am.
well, thank you for all of this. It's
Yes,
so
ma'am.
impressive.
And I think,
To add to that, I just want you to think and consider too, that this is one data point for our schools and teachers to consider. This data point was, the data was gathered in May when the students took that assessment. The students are now fifth graders, and the teachers have data for formative assessments within the classroom, plus the MAP data, unit assessments, and all of that. Yeah. So if you think of SC Ready as kind of the universal assessment, everyone's receiving the same assessment. Those formative assessments along the way measure where students are performing right this moment. So just consider that our schools and teachers are really good at triangulating that data and using this as one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, and they're up on the real time, you're saying. They're
Yes, ma'am.
operating in real time.
Yes, ma'am.
Will we get the data broken down by subgroups for each school?
we can do that, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Finance and operations update, Michael.
Good afternoon, good morning, yeah. Couple updates from finance and operations. The A word, Mr. Chairman, I know you're gonna ask that. Surprised you didn't ask earlier, but we're actually ahead of schedule on the audit right now. This is reconciliation week, so the finance folks are pushing through reconciling the payment to counties. State Department had to make an adjustment to the first payment to counties. So we're working again through the second version, but we're ahead of schedule, so we'll get that trial balance passed over. We're gonna do an external review with an independent reviewer. It's actually our previous auditor, and she's gonna come in and do an external review of our trial balance to make sure we're clean before we start the audit process in October. We'll also send out a reminder to our schools. Their deadline is November 2nd, so we'll push them for that. Again, trial balance review. Included in the new funding formula is something called Proviso 1.3, which is transparency reporting. It applies to all of our schools as well. It requires our schools in our district to post the budgets with a budget template and average salaries for categories. So our district is in compliance. The deadline for that was September 1st. We have a couple of our schools that need some prodding, so we'll be working with them right after this call to get it posted online. One of the requirements is if we do not post it on our website, the State Department can withhold our state funds. So we don't want our money withheld for this month. Operations, the next closure is winding down. I'll be back up in Salem tomorrow. We work with our state surplus in getting all the equipment moved out. We actually had Berkeley School District took the drive up to Salem and got some equipment, as well as many of our schools picked up equipment and inventory for that. So we'll close that down, and then the final funding will come back to the state, to us as well. We have a big patio projects going on out here in front. We'll start tomorrow. We have to tear out all that tile and put it down with concrete, so that'll be working on for the next week. And then also we're posting an asbestos inspection RFP and a cleaning RFP as well. So that's it for my update, sir.
Any questions? Just curious, why are we changing out the tile for the concrete?
It's very slippery, and someone already fell. It should have never been that type of tile that the church put out here. They continued outside in this.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, good afternoon. I am pleased to share an update of our support and implementation team accomplishments for the month of August. Susan, Perry, and myself visited Green Upstate High School on August the 17th to wrap their pre-opening conditions. We had a great tour of their facility and a collaborative chat with Chase Willingham, the school leader, as well as Melanie Hammock, from Green Central Office. Rihanna has wrapped our 21-22 Read to Succeed Act 284 requirements by reporting all summer reading camp expenditures and third grade student good cause exemptions to the department. And she has also collected and reported all data for 22-23 state reading coaches that are provided to schools that service students, schools that service grades K through 5 under the Read to Succeed Act as well. Through our nursing sub-grant, our school nurses that have been employed at a school since August of 21 have been awarded a stipend of $3,000. Right now, it looks like we are at least giving that stipend to 18 nurses across our portfolio. Nick, Dee, and Susan are collaborating to roll those funds out to qualifying school nurses across our portfolio. We were able to provide a behavior threat assessment and management training to over 75 school employees on August the 22nd. This BTM training covers the systematic process of investigating and assessing concerning behaviors to then build a school safety management plan for implementation. We were impressed with the turnout and the depth of requests for that training, and so we're looking at additional ways to consider offering things along those same lines. Perry, Tracy, and Susan participated in a 2-day supervisor symposium that was sponsored by SCASA and SEAL in our office in mid-August. And this was an intensive 2 days of reflection on current supervisor practices and also a capacity builder for them to add some more tools to their tool belt. And then also, this was very well received by those that participated, and so we look forward to continuing to collaborate with Liz, Michael, and SCASA for future offerings for our staff. Greenville Tech, Spartanburg Tech, Tall Pines, and as of this morning, I keep looking at my phone to see if there's more because these keep coming in minute by minute, but as of this morning, York Prep as well have recently been awarded a State Department approval letter for offering e-learning days. So this makes 9 schools across our portfolio that are able to offer 5 e-learning days for inclement weather in response to local threats such as power outages or water main breaks. So we have additional schools that also have their applications in. We're waiting on those approval letters, and like I said, those are coming in daily. We hosted our FY23 kickoff for federal programs and finance reporting in the office on August the 31st. This was a phenomenal all-hands-on-deck day. I think everybody in this room partook in some way, the day before, the day of, including the day after. I applaud both the finance and the programs team for putting on such a successful event. It was a day full of rich professional development. We had 64 participants in our home, and I think we utilized just about every square inch of this building. So that was a great day. We kind of had some meetings in the auditorium here, and then we've also utilized our other spaces for breakout sessions and things as well. So that concludes my update, pending any questions.
Yes.
Sparked my mind when she was talking. How are we equipped with or supplied with the resource officers? I know like 2 years ago that was an issue, and that the governor said yes, charter schools will have resource officers. So what is happening with that? Where's that state?
Yes, just in the month of August, and Dr. Mills, correct me if I say anything improper, but Dr. Mills has recently collected data from our schools in response to a survey from the state. The state survey looked like this. They were essentially saying school and or district, reach out to your local department. If they were given funds, do they have the ability and the capacity to provide an officer to you? Or local department, if we did not have funds to offer you, do you have the capacity and the funding to provide an officer? So right now the state is, we had our schools all responded, and we provided that data back to this department. So they're currently looking at ways of which they're going to fund for sustainability in a long-term plan. Yeah. Our schools right now have a short-term plan, but the state is looking at options for long-term options as well.
So when those officers were initially okay to also move into the charter district, that was a 2-year situation maybe, or do you know?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Okay, but you're looking for, we all see is important.
Yes.
There be a permanent.
Yes, the state's looking at a long-term solution, and they used the districts and the schools to reach out to the local departments to kind of see how they felt.
So, yeah, great, thank you.
Welcome.
I can give you a little more insight on that because I have a my day job, I have a police department, and the traditional school district contracts with the police department to pay X amount of dollars per hour that the SRO is there. And generally that pays their salary and then the benefits over that. So it's generally between, in this case, a school and the individual police department, and they work those out.
And do most of the schools have these officers?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you to our staff for the reports. Just a few comments off of that. Obviously, we're pleased with what we see so far on the data, but as John said, we still have a long way to go. But I am happy to see us making greater progress than the state overall. It will be interesting to see as the report cards come out next month, and of course, we're looking at the raw data right now on the grad rate. A lot of our schools really are running strong, but we do have some outliers that are not performing so strong when it comes to graduation. So we're going to dive deep into that, and we'll be providing you with updates on that. And in regards to the SROs, I was at the SCASA roundtable 2 weeks ago, and the chief at SLED, he presented, and he said the biggest problem, though, is these police departments have such shortages. They just don't have enough police officers to even provide SROs, even if there was funds for every charter school to have them. So some of our charter schools are very creative in what they do in terms of trying to make sure that teachers and staff and students are protected. And so I do know SLED is working on this. They're looking at an additional credentialing program to maybe get state constables and others a higher level of certification so we can try to fill those gaps. But it's my belief that every school needs to have an SRO. I mean, we live in a time where our schools need to be protected and defensive, and so hopefully the legislature and the governor will continue to work and provide more funding, and then SLED and law enforcement agencies can work to try to continue to try to improve on recruiting and retaining officers so that we have good quality people going into law enforcement. Just a few things, just to make you aware. On school visits, we were at Eastlink this week. We had a really good visit there up in Greenville. As you know, they're one of our Mandarin immersion schools, and we had some just really good engagements with teachers and students. A few weeks ago, we were at Fox Creek down in Aiken, and Congressman Joe Wilson, he joined us for that tour, and we had a good visit with him and his staff. And we had a panel of students that were talking about their experience there at Fox Creek, and that was great. And then we were also, just 2 weeks ago, we were at York Prep up in York County, and we were with Congressman Ralph Norman. And I had another really good visit, and he got to see the plans for their new school that they hope to open down the road. So it's exciting to see what our schools are doing. And then last week I was at Midlands Middle College, and really had a good, engaging visit there. I think I'm going to, as professional development, I heard a superintendent back at the superintendent's SCASA meeting back in the summer. He was retiring. I think he was from Newberry, and he was talking about how once a week he would go and teach a class. And it kept him really engaged with students, kept his teaching skills up. And so I think every now and then I'm going to go maybe teach history, economics, and government at Midlands Middle College. And I told Laurie Lee, I said, now, I'm not trying to get in your business. But they're very excited about that. So every now and then I'm going to go over there and teach a class. I haven't even told the staff that. But I think it'll be good for me to kind of be back in the school in that way, but it's also going to be good professional development. And on that note, I'm in my third year now in the SCASA SEAL training program, the Platinum program. And I think the best thing that was said at our program last week was the new superintendent over at Kershaw. He said, you know what, things have really calmed down in charter world the last 3 years. And he said, we don't feel threatened by y'all anymore, and we're just glad to see you here, Chris. So I do believe that, as we talked about relationships, Kathleen, relationships do matter. It's very important to me. And that's why I've been very engaged with SCASA. I've learned a lot, and I hope that my peers are learning a little bit from me as well. But we'll continue to stay engaged on that. Coming up, we have our new Chief of Communications and Public Relations. We'll start on September 26th. His name is Drew Johnson. He does that job for a company down in Tampa, Florida, but he's actually from South Carolina. And had reached out to me about another opportunity. And I said, you know what, send me your resume. And very impressive background in PR, communications, and even has kind of a little bit of a government relations, public affairs background. But we're excited to have him lead all our social media efforts, working with heritage brands. We want to be more robust there and continue to get our brand out there and talk about putting kids first. And speaking of Kids First, we have our conference coming up September 27th and 28th. Right now, there are over 300 people registered for the conference. We've raised over $100,000 with our partners at the Charter Institute at Erskine. And it's a 2-day conference. The first day is the two districts together. And then the next day we'll split out, and the two districts will kind of have their own little mini conference with school leaders and board members. We sent out the link to you, but we'll send it out again after this board meeting. If you can make it any time on the 27th or 28th, I think it would be important for you to be there to socialize with our school leaders and other board members. But also there's just going to be some great professional development training and a great speaker. So I would invite you to do that. Coming up on October 5th, it's that time of year again. I can't believe we're already talking about budget time, Michael and Nick. But we had our first call with the governor's office, executive budget office, about the next year's budget. And as you know, we're the only district and only superintendent in the entire state that gets to go before the governor and present our budget. So it's a great honor for us to be able to advocate on behalf of all charter schools and schools of choice. So on October 5th, we'll go in and actually formally present. And hopefully by then we'll have a little bit more data we can share and show that the return on the investment is there. And despite COVID, we're continuing to see steady gains in academic performance as we look to close the academic gap. And then on November 17th, we'll have a school leaders summit, and Jonathan Butcher and our new friend Ian Rowe, who just came out with the book Agency, they're going to be doing a performance up here on the stage and have kind of a Oprah Winfrey style conversation about institutions like schools and how that can play an important role in shaping young minds and help provide good positive points of direction for them in their lives. So, Jonathan, we're looking forward to you and Ian collaborating with all our school leaders. But again, board members, I invite you to come and look. If you can't stay for the whole day, maybe half the day, but we'd love to see you. In your packets, you do have an updated copy of the board schedule for this next year. We had to make a few changes for me. My SEAL training at SCASA are always on Thursdays. And so we had to adjust a few dates. So please make note of that on your calendar. We're going to be starting a Kids First podcast. We're going to be talking with education leaders from around the state and the nation about issues of school choice, charter schools, students, closing the achievement gap, diversity, and things like that. So we're going to be launching that next month. And in terms of launching that, I put out a thought piece on LinkedIn the other day, and I'll make sure and share that with y'all in an email as a PDF for those that are not on LinkedIn. But it was kind of, here's my why. This is why I'm in education. I was probably the last person you ever thought there would be. And it's a little bit about my story, but that's what this podcast is all about. It's asking people their why. Why are you in education? You know, why are you a teacher in a classroom? We want to get parents involved. We want to get kids involved. We're going to interview kids. And so I think it's going to be a really neat podcast, and Heritage Brands is working with us on that. And then we had a really good collaborative session of professional development earlier this week with the Charter Institute at Erskine. They came here to our house, and we had our staff and their staff, and we just had a great collaborative time, just one, planning for the Kids First Conference, but doing some development together. We had a lot of fun. We had some competition. And team, I think it was a good day, right? Yeah.
Did we win? That's what I want to know.
Well, we weren't competing against them. We actually broke up into small groups, and the small groups had members of each team on it. Yeah. So no, we
don't have football.
We might save that. Yeah, we might save that for the softball field or something. Maybe we have a Kids First softball tournament. And Dr. Pope, I heard you talk about the license plate. Maybe it's time we have a Kids First license plate and have those funds go to charter schools. Maybe we can work that out with some of our friends at the General Assembly. And I think that's Kids First Radio. The last few weeks, we've had Keith Bailey with PD Math and Science and Technology on the radio with Kevin Cohen and me. Debbie Vinny, she's the VP of the National Charter Alliance up in Washington. She had a really great perspective, gave us the national perspective on charter schools, and talked a lot about what's going on with D.C. public schools and the charter schools there in Washington, D.C. Tom Cronin with the Green Charter Network, we hosted him in studio. He drove down and joined us, and Dr. Jacinta Bryant with LAA, she was on as well. All these school leaders are doing a great job when we get them on the radio. I just love hearing their passion for kids. They're doing a great job. And, of course, it's an opportunity for them to promote their school and community. And, although it's a Columbia-based radio station and we're hitting this market, they do broadcast on the Internet. So I know people are listening to it around the state. And I'm also hoping that maybe it has a little bit of influence on the city of Columbia, and maybe we can have more conversations about having more schools of choice here in the Midlands, since we have such a great cluster in the upstate and the low country. But we're running a little thin here in Richland County, so we're hoping that that'll be the case. Pending any questions, Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report.
Any questions? All right, thank you. And before we adjourn, Kathleen, and I can't see all the way to the back, the lights are kind of bright, but Kathleen, I appreciate you mentioning that Lindsay's here. Lindsay was, I came on board in 2015 and Lindsay was here, and I guess you were here maybe 3 or 4 years after that, but it was good to get to know her and I learned a lot from her. So welcome, you're always welcome in our house. So, well,
So we'll gather outside, the doors over here for the unveiling.
Unveiling of
And
the
then
plan.
after that, we're gonna have a lunch. So we invite everybody, including board members, to join us for our special lunch.
okay, thank you. Then without further ado, I'll adjourn the meeting.